Morning, everybody. This is Bud Kukel. I'm happy to welcome you to the 21st annual NACC Data Update meeting. As you know, we have a large staff of people working at NACC, and two of the associate directors aren't presenting here today, but I should mention them also. It's Professor of Biostatistics Gary Chan and Professor of Epidemiology and Surgery Charlie Mock. But today, leading the discussion are going to be two of our new associate directors. Next slide, please. Next slide. Can you do the next slide? Oh, there we go. Kerry Stevens, she's an associate professor of and director of clinical research informatics and family medicine at the UW, and Sean Mooney, who's a professor and chief research information officer at UW Medicine also. And they're going to lead the discussion today, start off just telling us about some new things, where we're going and what's happening at NACC. And I hope there'll be a lot of exciting things for you to think about. I think there's some major shifts here that we're going to be able to bring to the centers that will really be useful. So without yammering on any further, I'll turn this over to Kerry and let her go ahead on this.
Great, thank you, Bud. I'm really excited to be here and meet you all. I wish that we weren't virtual and could actually meet in person, but hopefully in the future that will be more possible. So I'm Kerry Stevens. I'm an associate professor and clinical psychologist and biomedical informaticist, both here at the University of Washington. And as Bud said, I'm in the family medicine department and work a bunch in primary care, where we certainly see lots of patients with Alzheimer's and dementia-related issues. So I'm just thrilled to be a part of this team and be able to work with you all, and look forward to meeting many of you as we get more indoctrinated into all the great work that NACC and the consortium is doing. So I'd like to just start off by letting you all know some of the vision that we've been talking about at NACC. As Sean and I have recently joined NACC, we've been engaged in a lot of deep strategic planning within the center itself, and how we can be of more assistance and utility to everyone here, especially as we've been thinking through our renewal and all of the new directions we can go. So I think we wanted to kick off today by just giving you a quick overview of the overall NACC vision. I think the first piece that we want to really instill in you all is that our goal here is to continue to be a communication hub for the consortium and really build collaboration. So we hope that you're excited to see different ways that we're going to have new activities to try to bring people together around data science, around data sharing, in ways that we can help all of you. The second piece that we really want to emphasize is harmonizing data through lots of different ways that you currently do through shareable forms and data models and standard nomenclature. There's lots of ways that we can increase the way we do that by integrating with national efforts and standardized ontologies and data models, et cetera, that we've been talking through at NACC, and ways that we can start working with you all to bridge there. We also are really excited to bring forward some tooling that will allow you to do self-service access to data using various tools and internet technologies that we've been developing and distributing across the country through the University of Washington that Sean and I have been involved in. And in fact, you'll see a demo of that as part of this talk later. We also want to make sure that the consortium gets support from NACC around enabling machine learning and data science, where we can actually do consultation and take advantage of cloud enclaves that we've been migrating towards as well. You know, when we have supercomputing that's needed, the cloud offers incredible advantages to do that. Both Sean and I are involved in data science efforts within the University of Washington through several different organizations here, and we're happy to try to bring more of that to the forefront so we can be a resource to you all around those areas. We also want to emphasize that there are lots of new data types potentially that the consortium can start linking into research, or some of you already have, but we'd like to really help catalyze that, particularly around electronic health record data and claims data. Both Sean and I bring a lot of deep expertise in how to do harmonization with data collected in routine care. Many of you at your ADRCs are in institutions that have deep efforts around data harmonization with those types of data, and we'd love to help facilitate you connecting more with those areas. And then lastly, I know there's a lot of movement on trying to do a more advanced available infrastructure building around biospecimens and access to those samplings and understanding and being able to more rapidly figure out where those biospecimens are living and what might be available for future research. Next slide. So I think we wanted to highlight just a few things today that in particular we wanted to emphasize that we're going to share with you all. The first is Sean's going to talk a little bit about infrastructure and sort of the advantages of leveraging the cloud as a consortium here, and we're trying to lead the way with NACC and migrating many of our tools over to the cloud already, as some of you heard about last year. We also want to ramp up our ability to do more rapid data collection, releasing of forms more efficiently and timely. So we're going to be talking to you about the Redcap migration that we're doing. There may be many of you who know what that tool is, and for those of you who don't, look forward to later in the talk where you'll hear more about it. We also, I alluded to self-service access. So one of the things we've done at the University of Washington within our Institute of Translational Health Sciences has built a proprietary tool called LEAF that we've actually disseminated to several other institutions around the country. It's a cohort finding and a quick query tool that you can actually use for self-service, and we're going to show you a demo of a prototype we've been working on for NACC later and sort of end the talk there. And then finally, we want to make sure that we're starting to stir a conversation with you all in how you can better link, as I mentioned earlier, to electronic health record data sets and potentially really enrich the great research data sets you all work with now and can in the future. Next slide. Okay, so just a few accomplishments that we wanted to highlight, that we're proud of and hope that you guys are benefiting from, most importantly. So we've all been adapting to COVID. COVID has been, quite a crisis for the entire country and world at this point. The consortium here has not avoided that in any way as well. As you know, we have a remote UDS packet, a TPF TIP, and neuropsych data forms that are being distributed now across the consortium so that we can start to collect really important COVID-related data across the various cohorts. In fact, Redcap is a big piece of that, and we're using it to facilitate that release. We also, of course, have continued over this past year with lots of data distribution. We've had over 310 data requests completed out of the NACC Center. So, thank you very much to much of the NACC team and to any of you who have participated as part of those requests. And many of these folks are actually served outside the consortium as well. We wanted to highlight, we also have a new collaboration with SCAN we're very excited about. So we're going to be partnering with SCAN to help us with compiling image data across the consortium. And so we'll talk a bit more about that in some of our updates as well. And then we have a new website that's live. So if you'd like to go to naccdata.org, please do. We will be running both websites in parallel, and Brian will talk a little more about that later in the talk as well. And then we've also been making many of our tooling cloud enabled. And so we're very excited to say we're getting much more robust tooling set up in that environment. And that's going to allow us to stage things forward quite a bit with the cloud. And then finally, of course, as you guys know, a big part of NACC's business is putting out modules and revisions as much as we can. So we've continued to do that across this year as well. So next slide. I think I'm going to, at this point, turn things over to Sean and let him say a little more about himself and talk to you about a few more things. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Kerry. Hello, everyone. I'm Sean Mooney. I'm a faculty member in biomedical informatics at the University of Washington and also the Chief Research Information Officer of UW-Medicine, our health system. And I work with a number of consortia, both regionally and nationally. Really, really very excited to be here. So I want to start by talking about some of the exciting things that are working on that we're not going to do a deep dive on today. And one of those is that over the past year plus, NACC has spent a considerable amount of effort moving systems to the cloud. And really, from a user perspective or someone who interacts with NACC, you won't see many differences other than what we talk about here today. But I just want to kind of lay out the idea that we're laying a platform which we can build upon. And there are really a number of advantages of using the cloud. You're probably, those of you that spend a lot of time with IT or informatics are probably aware of this. The cloud can enable data to be more what we call fair, that is findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. The cloud can be more collaborative in its use for granting access or working with multiple sites together to do things. Can make better use of APIs for data submission, but also for accessing data and for connecting data together to multiple sites. And the cloud can be highly modularized so that different sites or different groups or individuals can develop modular apps that can click together like, essentially like Lego blocks. And other areas of the NIH are making significant investments in the cloud and national infrastructure, and integration with that becomes much, much easier. Next slide. Another area that I think I'd like to just present the idea of to talk about more in the future is the opportunity of leveraging electronic health record data or administrative claims data with the ADRCs. Over the past 10, maybe 15 years, other large national networks have developed the capacity to collect electronic health record data in addition to other types of research data sets that they're collecting, like say traditional research case report form data and things like that. And the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, or NCATS, and the CTSA Consortium has done a lot of work building national networks for sharing data. That includes developing data models that can describe electronic health record data and make it integratable across sites, to build the infrastructure for data use agreements to actually do that sharing. I think many of you probably participate in some of these, and we're excited about exploring that with this community. Next slide. In terms of what that actually means, NACC's goal is to support ADRCs to leverage existing local infrastructure to collect and harmonize EHR data and claims data to enhance, hopefully other existing data offerings within the network. And we believe that EHR and claims data can augment existing and planned clinical research data sets. If you're, I really want to make a pitch here that if you're interested in exploring electronic health record data or linkages that can be done, or you're participating in some of these other networks, please reach out to nachelp@uw.edu and we'll follow up with a conversation. Next slide. So the roadmap for the rest of today is that we are now going to do a deeper dive into NACC's data inventory and get an update on NACC's database and collection forms. We'll talk about work that's being done around data capture, including the new NACC website, and support for NACC internally for Redcap, so that data collected into NACC will leverage Redcap. And we will also talk about the LEAF tool and how we have adopted LEAF to enable self-service access and queries to NACC data sets. And then what we'll do is we'll hold questions. So please enter questions in the chat using the button on your Zoom window, and we'll hold questions till the end and answer them during the question and answer period at the end. So with that, I will turn it over to Marilee, who will tell us about NACC's data inventory.
Next slide. Hi, thanks for joining the NACC session. For those of you who I haven't met yet, I'm Marilee Talon, the Research and Consulting Manager at NACC. This portion of the presentation will recap how NACC has continued to support standardization of data collection over the last year through creation and revision of the NACC data forms. We wanted to start with this image to highlight that the NACC database continues to grow from your contributions. So on behalf of all of us at NACC, I'd like to thank you and your teams for your continued partnership with us. Next slide. So what's new with the NACC forms? We'll get started with the core of the NACC database, the UDS. Next slide. When COVID-19 disrupted your ability to conduct in-person visits, the ADRC Clinical Task Force was charged with revising the telephone follow-up visit packet and creating a new telephone initial visit packet. The most significant change was the introduction of the Remote Neuropsychological Test Battery, or TCOG. which allows for cognitive assessment by telephone or video conference. NACC would like to thank the CTF for all their effort with this work, particularly Suzanne Kraft and her team at Wake Forest, who led the TCOG development. Next slide. To find out more about the decisions that were made for the creation and revision of the TIP and TFP, you can visit this page on the new NACC website, and you'll hear more about the new website later in the session. Next slide. The Clinical Task Force also designed surveys to collect potentially valuable information related to the COVID-19 pandemic and how it's affecting participants and their families. We extend our thanks to Lisa Barnes and Rhoda Au, who led the creation of the COVID-19 Impact and Technology Accessibility Surveys. These surveys are freestanding and don't need to be administered with a UDS visit. Participation in collecting these data are encouraged, but entirely voluntary. Join the directors meeting tomorrow, where members of the CTF will provide more information about the collective response to COVID. Next slide. So where's NACC with the implementation of these data collection instruments? Centers should have everything that they need for data collection and submission of the TFP and TCOG. And to date, we have 6 centers who have submitted this data to NACC. Data collection documents have been distributed for the TIP and COVID surveys, and NACC is in the process of developing the DEDs and data submission systems with these assessments. Brian Staley will provide more information about this work later in the session as it relates to Redcap. Next slide. NACC is also working closely with Katja Raskowski, Teresa Gomez Isla, and the Latino ADC group to provide Spanish translated versions of the remote assessments and COVID surveys. The recommendation was made to move forward with a Spanish translated TCOG that excludes the Ray Vault, while the Latino ADC group searches for an appropriate list learning test for Spanish speakers. NACC is in the process of creating these documents, and we hope to release them to the centers over the next several weeks. Next slide. Next, we'll talk about what's new with the neuropathology forums. Next slide, please. We heard that many of you had valuable neuropathology data collected on the NACC NP form from cases that don't have UDS data. This prevented you from submitting that data to NACC. So in response to that, we created the Brief Dataset, or BDS, which collects basic demographic and diagnostic data. All fields other than date of birth and sex can be marked as unknown, removing any barriers from contributing NP data. Next slide. And we wanted to highlight that since the BDS was created specifically to allow NP data submission for non-UDS cases, that the BDS is submitted through the NACC NP data submission system. Next slide. We're also pleased to announce that version 11 of the NP form was released earlier this week. It introduces a set of questions assessing the presence of RTAG pathology. All other questions and response options have remained intact from version 10. A special thanks goes to Pete Nelson, Ann McKee, and Gabor Kovac, who led the creation of the new RTAG content. More information about this version update will be covered at tomorrow's NP core session, and we hope you're able to join that. Next slide. NACC has been accepting BDS data since May of this year. And as I mentioned earlier, the NP version 11 form and guidebook was released via email earlier this week. When we have more information about the release date for the NP version 11 DEDs, data templates, and data submission systems, we'll share that with you. Next slide. Next, we have a couple of updates on the UDS modules. Next slide, please. First, we heard your concerns about the LBD module's burden on participants and personnel. In response to that, the LBD module workgroup and NACC developed a shortened version. This version was released last February. And to avoid disrupting studies that are using the original version, NACC continues to support data submission of the original full-length version alongside the shortened version of the module. Next slide. We're also excited to share that we're close to releasing the Down syndrome module. This effort was an NIA initiative, and over the last year, NACC has been working closely alongside our colleagues at the Alzheimer's Biomarker Consortium Down Syndrome to create this module. When curating the series of assessments for this module, there was an emphasis to utilize instruments already used by the ABCDS whenever possible, so that in the future, data could be leveraged and harmonized from both the ADRCs and their consortium. Next slide. The Down Syndrome Module Workgroup is currently pulling together training documents and videos that will be available through the NACC's website. Once these materials are available, NACC will release the initial visit packet of the module, and we hope to have these available to you in the next month. Next slide. Lastly, we wanted to provide a brief update on biomarker data collection at NACC, specifically MRIs. Next slide. At the NACC session last year, we presented on the improvements that we were making on our MRI cleaning processor for legacy scans. We want to extend a special thank you to the centers who participated in our pilot. With your participation, we've been able to make extensive progress and have successfully processed over 70% of the legacy scans submitted to NACC through our old system. Our pilot centers have also contributed nearly 4,000 additional scans through our new system. With these successes, we're able to invite all our centers to use the new MRI cleaning processor. So if you haven't already received an email, please keep an eye out for one in your inboxes. Next slide. As a reminder, we're taking questions through the Q&A function on Zoom, but we also want to remind you that you can reach out via email to nackhelp@uw.edu at any time with your questions. Next slide. Lastly, we want to highlight that the NACC data is made richer by our partnerships with NICRAD, NIGADS, ADGC, ADSP, and now SCAN. We're so pleased to be working with these partners to continue to help the community get data and samples easily. You'll be hearing more from NACC and SCAN in the coming months about the SCAN image submission process, which is different than the current NACC system for legacy scans. Next up, we have Ashley and Brian, who will be presenting on Redcap and how NACC will be making the data submission process easier for you.
Thanks, Marilee. I'll take it from here. If I don't know you already, my name is Brian Staley. I'm the technology manager at NACC. I'll cover a few updates today, but let's start with data capture and our improvements being made to the data collection process. So as Kerry kind of hinted at earlier, we're very excited to announce that NACC has been working with a team of Redcap experts at UW to implement Redcap as part of our data pipeline. I'll kind of go over what the improvements are to this process, and I'll summarize how it fits into our workflow and how it impacts all of you in a minute, but I thought we would start by introducing Redcap to anyone who's not familiar. And to do that, I would like to introduce Ashley Lewis, the lead Redcap admin for University of Washington, and an expert in the maintenance and support of Redcap instances that are being used by institutions all across the Northwest. Ashley has very kindly agreed to give us a little intro to Redcap and talk a little bit more about her group. So at this point, I will hand it off to Ashley.
Thank you, Brian. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. Again, my name is Ashley Lewis. I am the Redcap administrator for the University of Washington's Redcap instance. So Redcap actually stands for Research Electronic Data Capture. It is a leading tool in clinical research with over 4,500 institutions worldwide that are currently utilizing it. And it's just continuing to grow because the ease of use, it's web-based. So it was also built by researchers, specifically for researchers. So you don't have to have a programming degree to kind of really know how to use it. There's a little bit of a learning curve, but most of the time you can kind of learn how to use it and build your own instruments. It's very highly customizable, both with external modules and just being able to utilize the general functionality with it. It is HIPAA compliant, and it also seamlessly allows sharing of projects and data collection instruments between different sites, which makes it really nice for these multi-site collaborations between institutions. So we can go forward to the next slide and we can talk about our instance of Redcap in particular. So the University of Washington ITHS Redcap instance is one of the largest Redcap instances in the Redcap consortium. We support over 12,000 active users, and we have over about 25,000 projects. Some of our ADRCs use our Redcap instance as well. Our Redcap administrators also ensure security of other national steps as part of our as well. We allow upload from other Redcap supported sites, which will make integration really easy and seamless. And we also offer a comprehensive support model for anybody using our Redcap instance. And with that, I can hand it back to Brian.
Thanks so much. So the first thing I want to start with here when before I get into how this fits into NACC's pipeline is I wanted to give a shout out to the centers that have built and shared and continue to build and share Redcap dictionaries with the entire ADRC community. Specifically, I wanted to call out Kansas, Michigan, and one Florida. The work you guys do and your willingness to share with the group is just incredibly impressive. That's exactly what we need in a community this big, is we need to share work, share files. And so that work you've done has helped to standardize all the tools across the ADRCs. It helps new centers get set up and working much more quickly. It's greatly reduced the amount of duplicated work that people have to do. And I think that most important to this section we're going into, it has really given NACC a good head start on implementing Redcap in our own process. We are looking at your files and using your dictionaries to help us design this work. So thank you everyone who's been involved with the Redcap community. You guys are really great. We can go on to the next slide here. So let's talk about how Redcap can fit in to NACC's data pipeline right now. So Redcap will act kind of as the point of data submission, providing several robust data entry options, including the ones we've kind of mentioned before, but to go over them again here, there's a mobile-friendly web interface. There's a bulk upload option where you can upload CSV files similar to what you do now through NACC's in-house options through our own software. And there is an API for programmatic data submission. I know this is something the centers have wanted for a long time. There was already a Q&A question about the API availability. One of the reasons that Redcap works so well in this instance is it has a built-in API, has really great support for that. So that will be part of the benefit gained by this move. So after data are submitted to Redcap, they go through our normal QC error check process just exactly as they do today. Feedback is sent back to the user, and then any changes being made to the data can be sent back through Redcap in kind of a one-way process, exactly as it is today. Once data is entirely QC'd and clean and ready for distribution, it is sent out through our normal distribution channels. So Redcap is really just taking the place of NACC's in-house data submission system and UI. So that's kind of where it fits in. As you can see, the workflow is very similar to what you are used to today. We're trying to keep it as seamless as possible. So next slide. Okay, so that sounds really great. How do we get there? The approach we have taken is to start with the COVID-19 surveys. Those two surveys are very distinct from UDS data. They're not tied directly to UDS data, so they make a great candidate for a first step into this software, a first test for us. So working with Ashley and her team at UW, we've got a prototype running already of these forms. We've got an instance of Redcap running. We've got everything set up and configured. And the next step is to figure out how to give you all access. How do we securely grant access to the ADRC users? Once we've figured out the configurations needed and got all of the account migration worked out, the next step is to invite you to come in and send in COVID-19 survey data into Redcap and begin collecting it. That gives us kind of an MVP that we can build on. And so at this point, we are talking about steps 4 and 5 are kind of the follow-up. So at step 3, I would say we have an MVP system that's working. We're collecting COVID-19 survey data. You have user access. So the next step is to continue integrating our QC system, our distribution system, tying everything together. And then step 5 is to begin the process of porting in additional forms and modules into Redcap to get one centralized kind of approach to everything. So that's the process we're taking. Step 1 is finished here. We're in the middle of step 2 right now. So we're hoping to actually invite users to submit data to this system very soon. So let's go ahead, go to the next slide if you would. So what does this mean for you? I do want to call out here that obviously this will allow NACC to produce faster release of forms and modules. which is, I think, a great benefit to everyone. There are obviously the improved upload options, which I mentioned before, the web interface, mobile friendly. The API is going to be a big one for some of you, I know. And then if you are already using Redcap locally at your ADRC, it's an even more streamlined process for you because you're interacting with another Redcap system. I do, as part of that point, I want to call out that this does not require you to adopt Redcap for your own use locally. This change is just part of NACC's system. You would still be able to get all of these benefits regardless of how you currently handle data collection. I just want to make that really clear. So again, if you have any questions or comments about how this process will affect you or what this looks like or the benefits gained or any of that kind of stuff, post in the Q&A, we'll answer them here. You can also email nachelp@uw.edu. You're also welcome to reach out to me, my email directly, or to hit us on Slack. We'll respond to you there, but talk to us, I guess, is my message here. Give us feedback. We want to hear what your opinions are about this change and the direction we're going. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So yes, so this is similar to what I just talked about. I just want to, again, reiterate, any feedback you have about our approach, please submit to us. We're going to switch topics here and talk a little bit about improvements that are being made to the other end of the pipeline, which is data access. After we've collected and cleaned the data and it's ready for distribution, we're also making improvements to how people can receive that data. So next slide, please. Yes, data access. So data access starts with a good communication platform. So I'd like to start off this section by talking about the new website. A few people in the presentation so far have hinted at it, so let's talk about it. Next slide. So as Kerry, I think, mentioned, the prototype is now live at nacdata.org. I really strongly encourage you to go and check it out. This is another situation where we want your feedback during this process of finalizing the website. It's going to look a lot different, but it's very clean, it's simplified, it's accessible, it's mobile friendly. We've really done a lot of good work, I think, to make this a good, usable site for everyone. So please go try it out. Let us know what you think. If you feel like something's missing or you like it, tell us all these things. I was going to mention here, oh yeah, sorry. So let's go to the next slide. I'm looking for my image. There it is. So this is a view of the new website. As I said, the interface has been designed to be simple, accessible, usable. Check it out. If you have trouble finding something on the new site, you're welcome to reach out to us. This is the kind of feedback we would like. And I also wanted to call out the portal button in the upper right there. When you go to this site and you click that button, it should lead you to a small portal page. If you'll go to the next slide, I think we'll have an image of it. Here it is. It's a very simple page, but the idea here is we wanted to put all of your submission systems and the tools you need to use after logging in into one place. That's not the case in the current website, so we've tried to really just put everything in one location for you. So click that yellow portal link. It should send you to a page like this, and you should have access to all your systems in one place, really easily available. Let us know if this works for you. If you prefer a different layout, we'd love to hear what you think of this. I'll leave that up for just a second. All right, so it's through this new website actually that we're going to continue this topic of how do we improve the ability for people to access NACC data. So we want to offer new tools and new ability for people to interact with our data in a web-friendly kind of format. And so this is a good way to introduce LEAF, the topic of LEAF that Sean mentioned earlier. It's a really impressive self-service data access tool that we're hoping to launch following this website launch. So thanks to some amazing work by Sean's team at UW Medicine Research IT, including Nick, who I'll introduce here in a moment, we do have an instance of LEAF already running with actual NACC data in it. So Nick Dobbins is the software engineering lead of Sean's team at UW Medicine Research IT, and he has agreed to kind of introduce this tool and to give us a live demo of its use. He is a braver person than I am, but it's a really amazing tool, and I think this will be really interesting. I love seeing LEAF in action. So Nick, I will hand it off to you if you're ready.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, Brian. Great. So I'm going to talk about LEAF a little bit. As Brian said, my name is Nick Dobbins. I'm the software engineering lead at UW Medicine Research IT. And we're going to take a look at how Leaf can be configured to work with NACC data and make data accessible to everyone here on the call. So next slide, please. Great, so just a brief intro for folks who have not seen Leaf before. Leaf is a free kind of open source web application for cohort discovery on virtually any clinical database or data model. So it's designed to be just lightweight, flexible, and provide a window into data such that you can ask questions of NACC data without needing to know exactly how to program or how to know each and every field and so on. Leaf is developed at Research IT at UW-Medicine, as I mentioned, and it's in production use or being actively piloted at over 10 different academic medical centers we're aware of, including Johns Hopkins, the University of Chicago, UC Irvine, and of course at UW. Next slide, please. Excellent. So specific to NACC, the current prototype that I'll be showing includes NACC UDS data. And this is, just to reemphasize, this is self-service. The goal here is to allow people who want to do research on NACC data access without needing to necessarily have a programmer involved, and then also be a nice gateway to NACC consults as well for cases where Leaf would not be sufficient to completely answer the question. The access to this Leaf instance will be restricted to people who have signed data use agreements with NACC. And as I mentioned, the goal here is to allow for anything from simple to relatively sophisticated self-service queries in just seconds, basic demographic visualizations, and then fast and direct data exports to CSV files so you can analyze the data as you'd like. All right, and with that, I will jump into the demo and try to share my screen. And it looks like, oh, perfect, thank you. So let's give this a try. Super. All right, and can everyone see my screen? Excellent. All right, so let's jump in. So this is the Leaf user interface for folks who haven't seen it before. The basic idea is the items on the left are an ontology or a hierarchy of data. In the case of NACC, we've tailored Leaf to be designed around NACC forms in UDS. So you may recognize the names of the forms, and if we drill down and click on these, you can see the individual questions and the answers within the forms as well. And we will use these concepts, we call them, to drag over to the right and create our queries and ask questions. So to start, I'm going to kind of show a few example queries. I'm not an expert in NACC data, so I appreciate your patience, but I will kind of walk through some interesting questions. I hope that will kind of get you thinking about what you can do with Leaf. So we can start by maybe asking, you know, how many patients have had a kind of dementia impairment global rating of questionable impairment? Let's start with that. So we find questionable impairment, and before even dragging this over, if you kind of, I'll zoom in just a little bit, hopefully that helps. If you look just in this little green person on the right, without running any queries, without dragging anything else over, we already have an idea of how many patients have ever answered, for example, no impairment, questionable impairment, and so on. So about 19,000. So we'll drag this over, and as you can see, kind of in plain English, we have find me patients who, anytime, at least once, answered questionable impairment to this question. So I'm going to click Run Query. All right, and if you keep your eyes kind of peeled to the top, you'll see we found about 19,000 patients. And if I click to the left here, we can get, in just a click, this basic visualization and get a kind of sense of who these patients are at a high level. And if we further click on this little person here, the patient list, we can even see row level data for these patients. So I'm going to click back and we can refine this a little bit more. Let's then add in the question of, you know, how many of these patients, how many have a primary diagnosis of Alzheimer's? So there are many questions here, so there's a lot to search for. And luckily, Leaf includes a kind of Google-like search feature where we can simply type in phrases or words that we know appear in the question. And so, for this example, I know this is the question I'm looking for. If you're familiar with the UDS kind of variables or columns, you can even type in those. So in this case, NACC ETPR, we know is the name, so I could alternatively search for NACC ETPR. And sure enough, there we go. Okay, so we'll look, click on that and drill down, and we can see, again, at a high level, how many patients have ever answered these questions without needing to run any queries ourselves. As I mentioned, let's build upon our current query though, and we'll drag over Alzheimer's disease. And let's run that. Okay, we found about 11,000, about 12,000 or so. And we can even kind of refine this and say, you know, perhaps at one point they did not have a primary etiologic diagnosis of Alzheimer's, but they do now. So let's ask, you know, at the most recent visit, how many people had this as the answer? Now we find about 10,000. And as before, we can go and visualize this. We can look at the row level data. But let's make this a little bit more interesting now and ask a question about progression. So we want to know perhaps how many patients with this diagnosis who initially perhaps had questionable impairment progressed to severe impairment or moderate impairment. So I will go back to global CDR. All right, and again, we'll find moderate impairment. And if we, you know, there's fairly sophisticated queries that we really don't have time to get too deep into today, but we'll do something a little interesting. So notice if I begin to drag this over, we have little hints down here that I can also drag this below. So here we're establishing a time connection. So we begin with questionable impairment, and we will change this to within the following 5 years, how many patients then had moderate impairment. And most recently, the primary diagnosis was again Alzheimer's. So you can kind of get a sense of how sophisticated queries can be, and hopefully, you know, intuitively and, you know, written in plain English, we can build upon them. So great, we've found about 1,400 patients now. I'm gonna go ahead and, I don't want to lose my work, so I'm going to say save my query. So we'll say global CDR, and this will be questionable to moderate and AD. All right. Excellent. So I've saved my query. So next time I come in leave, I won't lose it. I can just build right upon what I had before. And again, so we can visualize this, get a sense of the breakdown of patients, and go to the patient list. And I'd like to talk about the patient list a little bit here too, because this is really critical and I think really useful, hopefully functionality for folks. So by default, we can see kind of row level data. It's almost like a spreadsheet. We have a nice table that we can click, we can move columns around, and, you know, understand the data a little better. We can sort, we can kind of search and so on. But we can do a lot more too, because inevitably we don't want to just know demographics. We'd also like to see kind of row level data within the UDS data set. So if I click add more data, notice that again, we have our forms. And suppose we want to, you know, say, show me for people's subject health history. You know, I'd like to see that. And I'll say, you know, anytime, show me the subject health history. We'll click add data set. And great, so we'll now see, so by default, Leaf has just added another column. It's telling us there's 7 records for this patient and 8 for the next. Because patients can have, NACC patients can have many many kind of rows of data for this, many submissions. It'll also kind of summarize the earliest and the latest, but I think the most interesting piece here will again be kind of drilling down and looking at the row level data. So if I click on this person, so I think the NACC data is, you know, it tends to be kind of long. There's many variables and so on, so we won't really get into that today. But suffice to say, the actual row level data we now have immediately available here. So we can see the smoking years, the number of packs smoked, and so on. So I think having the kind of data dictionary along with NACC would be really helpful here to interpret the data. But we don't have to do that within Leaf. We can also export that. So I think this is a good point to say, obviously if we're exporting data, we want to be very mindful that although it's de-identified, it still needs to be protected and securely kept and limited to your own access and analysis. But let's jump ahead. So here we just clicked export. We can see there's a CSV export, and all I need to do is click export, and there we go. I'm not going to spend a ton of time kind of showing the data, but suffice to say, we now have a local copy in CSV form that we can analyze in a stats program or in Excel or Tableau, you name it. All right, so I'll exit out of that. And real briefly, we can also do a few more things. So suppose, for example, we wanted to say, it's not exactly relevant to the cohort that I just pulled up necessarily, but just as an example of what we could do, if we wanted to say, I want to look at kind of BMI data for body mass index, for example, I can click BMI anytime, and Leaf will automatically kind of show trend lines, and we can even compute statistics for any numeric data and find and ask questions of, what's the mean, the median, the min, and the max. We can do this for virtually any numeric NACC data. So hopefully this is exciting as well. All right, and I think in the interest of time, perhaps we'll I'll stop here and we can kind of focus on moving on, and please direct your questions to the Q&A chat within Zoom. I'll also mention we don't have it visible at the moment, but there will also be a really simple, easy button that you can click to direct questions to NACC Help and either ask a question just at NACC Help how to use Leaf, or even move on to a consult and kind of request help that way too. So I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Nick. I never get tired of watching that tool. I think it's really amazing how much it can do. So just to kind of reiterate a couple of things that Nick pointed out here, this is not intended to completely replace the consultation process. NACC is still doing data requests the same way we always do. We have people ready to help investigators put together data sets as they need. And in this case, we feel like Leaf will be a really good addition to that process, where investigators can use the tool and interact with consultants and kind of go back and forth. So we're hoping it will enhance our existing workflow and offer a lot of really strong web-based tools for our investigators. And the second thing I wanted to reiterate is that we're intending Leaf to be used by authorized users who have signed the DUA. This is not a publicly available thing to anyone who just walks into the website. This, again, is behind the same walls that our existing data distribution process is behind. So just wanted to call those out again. As Nick said, if you have any questions about how this tool works or how it folds into NACC's existing workflow, please post in the Q&A or reach out to us at NACC Help or hit us on Slack. We're happy to talk to you about it there. And it does look like we're at the point where we need to move into the Q&A section. So I will at this point hand it off to Marilee, who I think will go through any questions that have come in so far. Go ahead, Marilee.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, we've gotten a lot of excitement and questions through the Q&A function already. Some of them we've tried to keep up with and type those answers. So please check the Q&A box to see if we've responded to your question. Before I start with the questions, I just wanted to, Suzanne submitted, just give a shout out to, Brian mentioned some of the centers who have helped with the Redcap data dictionaries, the collaborative data dictionaries. So I also just wanted to shout out UC Irvine, Harvard, Boston, and Wisconsin, as well as Emory, who've all contributed to that effort as well. So I just wanted to start off with that. The next question I wanted to address to, I guess, Brian. The question is, does Leaf also link to biosamples and genetic data?
I'm not sure how to answer that at this point. The work we've done so far on Leaf does not tie into that data, but the availability of that data, certainly it will. I guess I would want some clarification around what do you mean by does it tie to biosample and genetic data? If you're just talking about the availability of that data, yes, the intention is that Leaf will tie into that availability, so you can search and say, okay, for this UDS participant, there are samples available. potentially here's where they are. That is kind of our vision of it.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Brian, and just add that the overall vision for what we want to do with LEAF is have it be a self-service tool that links to all of the different federated data sets that NACC helps with harmonization. And so some, as you know, NACC stores directly, but many of these larger and different data types live in other parts of the consortium. So I think that some of the issues that make that complex have to do with identification, so protected health information. And so when you start getting into genetic data and image data, it's harder to protect PHI. So we will, of course, be following all of the HIPAA regulations and governance that's laid out in the consortium already as we think thoughtfully about how to enable LEAF to do as much as possible for you all.
Thanks, Brian and Kerry. The next question, I'm going to start with Brian again. How do we get an account on LEAF?
This is actually one of the things we need to solve before we can release LEAF more widely. We're running into this question of how do we tie all of these different tools and processes together under a unified account. We don't want people to have to come in and log in with 15 different accounts, one for LEAF and one for Redcap and your NACC account as well. So we're looking to create a unified account kind of structure where one account will get you into all of these different systems. At this point, there is no way to access LEAF. It's locked down just to our internal testing, but as we release it, we will let you know how to create an account, and it'll go through the same process you go through now to set up a data request. You would log in with credentials and you sign a DUA, and then you would have access to the data after that point. I don't know if that was clear.
Yeah, I want to just say we love the question. It's telling us that you guys are excited potentially to access it. So we absolutely want to fast track figuring out those permissioning. I think there was another question, Marilee, maybe tied to that around that maybe it got answered in the Q&A, but maybe worth bringing up around who all would get access to LEAF and sort of the vision of that. And I don't know, Brian, if you want to comment on that piece.
Sorry, you cut out a little bit there.
Sorry, I was saying, do you want to make a little commentary on who we're envisioning being able to potentially access LEAF, and I think the parallel access that we're thinking about in terms of people who've already signed DUAs. I know that was mentioned some in the presentation, but I think people are curious about who gets to access it.
Sure, yeah. So the intention is to use LEAF the same way we use our current process, meaning it would not only be used by investigators, external investigators looking to use NACC data in their own research, but also ADRC users, anyone effectively who has the rights to view NACC data and who is willing to sign a DUA will have access. For those people who already have accounts, who have already signed a DUA, we're hoping to create an account for you already to migrate your existing account effectively so that you just have access to LEAF kind of by default. So that's where we'll start with this development, is taking our existing users and getting them access to this new tool, and then creating a pipeline for new users to come in and use the tool that way. I feel like I answered that question. Is that what you were looking for, Kerry?
Yep, that's great, Brian. And I think there were a couple of other questions, and I'll let Marilee take back over again, but there were a couple of other questions around, can folks use LEAF natively in their own data sets as well, in their own environments? And I think Sean posted up, this is an open source tool, but since there are multiple questions coming in around that, we want to assure you all this is an open source tool that's available on GitHub now. We've had lots of other universities actually adopt LEAF. Mostly the use cases have been using LEAF for their electronic health record harmonized data sets, but absolutely you could use them for UDS or other standard data sets that you're using within your own environment. So it is a tool available for others to adopt, and we'd be happy to talk to folks who are interested in exploring that.
Kerry, where do you want folks to direct their questions? Should they reach out to NACC Help, and then we'll connect you with them?
Yes. NACC Help is where we're trying to send you all today. So you have a single place to go, nacchelp@uw.edu, and we will absolutely filter all your questions to the right place within NACC to get back to you.
All right, we have a question about Redcap. It says, will the data model implemented in Redcap be the same as the current data model? For example, will each record still be uniquely identified by a multi-field composite key? packet, form ID, form ver, ADC ID, PT ID, visit date. Is this a question for you, Brian? Sorry, I keep punting them all to you.
That's fine. They're all in my wheelhouse, I guess. So thanks, Nick May, for sending this in. This is something that we're trying to figure out right now. This is one of those 1,000 questions that we have to answer to get this integrated the right way. We are really hoping to keep Redcap working as closely to the existing system as possible, so there's as little change to all of your processes as possible. I do think that we can get Redcap to work the same way on the same kind of unique identification structure as we use currently. Ashley, if I say something wrong here, jump in, feel free. I am no Redcap expert. That's why we are partnering with Ashley and her team, and that's also Nick, Nick May, this is why I reached out to you recently and talked about Redcap. We're trying to talk to everyone who uses Redcap regularly to really make sure that we're doing this in the easiest way for everyone involved and the best way going forward for NACC. So I know that's a really wishy-washy answer, but yes, I believe we can do what you asked there. That is our hope.
All right. I think this is a follow-up question to, would it be difficult to ingest data into Leaf from Redcap? I think this is the follow-up. It says, what ontology would we need to map to, e.g. from Redcap? Nick, is this, oh, sorry, Ashley, is this for you? Do you?
If I can take it if they want to expand on the question. I'm not exactly sure what ontology. Is this for a Leaf specific?
So let me see if I can jump in, Ashley. Okay. So Leaf actually does have functionality to, if you have in Redcap a set of patient identifiers, for example, and we use this now within the University of Washington Redcap and Leaf instances that we have running. We have hundreds of users here at the university using Leaf right now to query our enterprise-wide data warehouse, for example. And they can go into Redcap and create a list of medical record numbers or patient IDs that match what we have in electronic data warehouse, and they can actually upload that right into Leaf and use that as the sort of case finding identifier set that they want to use, and then pull data from Leaf, from the enterprise-wide data warehouse, and then we actually output it. We do have it exportable right back into Redcap, as well as CSV files, which I think CSVs are the preferred format here in NACC. So I don't know if we're completely getting at that quite yet, and I imagine the questions will get deeper around what you locally might have within your Redcap instances and the kinds of identifiers you might want to use. But I just wanted you all to know there is that software functionality, and it's the kind of thing we'd love to hear use cases of what you'd like to see met so that we can see how we can target the utility of the tool the best for all of you.
Nick, did you want to add something? I just see that you're unmuted.
Yeah, I was ready. Kerry nailed it. So as long as there are NACC IDs on both sides, and that feature is enabled by the NACC team, you can add whatever data you'd like, whatever data is in your Redcap project. You would hypothetically be able to import that into Leaf, and then any of your local collaborators or outside collaborators who have access to the Redcap project and have access to the NACC Leaf instance would automatically be able to see all the data too. So in that way, you would be able to import site-specific data as well.
Thanks, Nick. So we're reaching the top of the hour. We have a couple more questions in the Q&A, but it looks like these will require a little bit more conversation with the attendees who submitted them. So I'm going to ask people, if you have not received a reply either verbally live or typed in the Q&A box, to send your questions to nachelp@uw.edu, and we'll get back to you. And I think that's all we have for today. So we really appreciate all the excitement, all the questions, and look forward to more of your questions coming to us at nachelp@uw.edu.